We're going to teach you how to introduce people to RPGs on today's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the What is Tabletop Podcast. I am Frank. I have been GMing for over 10 years, and with me is Charles.
Hey, and actually, I think it's probably close to 11 years now.
Wow, math. That's how that works.
That's how that works.
Years is subjective.
Very. I don't know when you first started, like the exact moment. So.
I think it was 2016. So, like, even then...
It was
2015. It was definitely 2015, because I think this is the 10th year, but then that means going into... You see what I'm saying? How, like, years are...
Yeah.
It's like how when you're first born, you're technically 0, but it's your first birthday. You know, it's stuff like that.
Yeah, get it. That's confusing.
Yeah, anyway, welcome to What is Tabletop. We promise we talk about important things. Like today, where we're going to talk about what, Charles?
We're going to be talking about how to get your buddies into playing RPGs with you.
Yes, but before we do that, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends if you like this video. Awesome. Share it with them, and maybe it'll convince them to play with you in your next game night. And if it doesn't, blame Charles.
Yes, it's my fault 100%.
100%.
100%.
100%.
Right.
All right, so, yeah, we're going to talk about how to get people into the hobby, because it's a new year, and everyone has new goals. And occasionally, some people's new goals are, I want to play D&D, or I want to play an RPG. And we're going to talk about how to get your friends into that. We're going to talk about maybe you already have a play group and you want to try something different. How can you convince them to do that as well?
Spice up that game life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Charles is a huge Spice Girls fan. I guess the first thing we should talk about, Charles, is probably the real life experience we have of people getting into the hobby.
Yeah.
How the heck can we do this? Because we can talk about, like, here are steps A through 7 that you can do. But honestly... talking about actual stories is probably going to be the best way we can do it.
Yeah, for sure. So, Frank, how did you get in the hobby?
Glad you asked, and it was not a forced question, Charles.
Nope, not at all. That felt completely natural and flowing. Yeah.
So I started back in the old days of when I was in college. I think like a lot of people did. Really what happened is I got into board gaming right out of high school, and I was like, board gaming's super fun. And this was right when like the peak of Geek and Sundry was, where like they had Will Wheaton's Tabletop. Critical Role hadn't started yet, but it was about to start. And I was like, this D&D thing seems interesting, seems cool. And for like years before then, I had seen like videos of people playing, like for example, Acquisitions Incorporated and stuff like that. And I was like, that's really cool. I'll never be able to have a friend group that can play that game. So then what happened is I had gotten my friends into board gaming. And then from there, I was just like, let me just see if any of them would be interested in D&D. And a few of them were. And then that's how my first group started. That's right. I'm not only a forever GM, I was a first-time GM doing this with no blueprint. So you can do it too, and you'll be just as bad as all of us, but it's okay because we all get better over time.
As you guys know, I'm newer to the TTRPG world. However, Frank was not my first exposure to tabletop gaming. I, as a young buck, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I knew what Dungeons & Dragons was. I always kind of had an idea of what it was. There have been times I've attempted to play it. Never really got around to play. I've had, I think it was 3rd edition, probably.
Maybe.
I can't remember. It might have been advanced.
If it was the 90s, it was probably 3.5 for sure.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember which. It actually, because of the who introduced it to me, left kind of a bad taste in my mouth a little bit. I was still interested in the concept of it. My family, we had instituted a game night, so we were playing a lot of board games. I've always been into board games since I was a teenager, and then eventually, as an adult, I met up with a common friend, a mutual friend, Zach Brooks, to introduce me to Frank.
Yes,
my buddy.
Indeed.
And then he let me do a one shot, and the rest is history. And here we are. You know.
I mean, I feel like that is the two ways people get into the hobby. It's they tried in the past and something happened and they were like, I don't know. And then the right group came along and then they got into it. Right. Or you were like me and you were just like super interested in it and you forced other people to be interested in it by default.
And that's where I'm at now. I'm so interested that I want people to be interested in it. For example, like I really want my wife to play these games, but she is not as interested in it.
I guess my tip number 1 is just ask. That's really going to be the easiest way.
For real.
Just be like, hey, you fellow nerds. Because let's be honest, if you're watching this, you're already a nerd.
Yeah.
Right. And if your friend sent you this video, you are also a nerd. There's no way you're going to convince me otherwise.
We do what we do because we love it, and nerds love this kind of stuff. So
you just ask. Figure out what the interests are. I played with a lot of different groups, and the most recent group that we played with, part of the reason we even got together was because our friend Zach Dunkerton just asked people. That's all that happened. And we had 2 friends, Hannah and Evan, who were both like into Lord of the Rings or fantasy genres as a whole. And that was an easy step in the door, right? Oh, you like fantasy. Let's play a game that's fantasy based. And that got them through the door. And then since then they've been hooked and they do it on their own. And now Evan's even GMing a little bit, which is really cool.
Yeah.
It's fun to see that growth. And so just ask. You can be on the lookout for people specifically, or you could just be like, you are my group of friends. This is something I want to try. Can we try it out?
Yeah. And again, if you're one of those people who are, you're just maybe afraid to take the first step, there are a lot of local games that, there's one local establishment here that I'm on their Discord right now. People are asking, like, saying, hey, I'm starting a new Dungeons & Dragons 5e game, looking for players. Like, I have 2 right now, and there's nothing wrong with, and even doing it online. There are lots of different ways to meet new people and just to get a feel for the game if you're not sure about even introducing to your friends first. If you want to play with a bunch of strangers at first, nothing wrong there. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that obviously you can definitely do that stuff. It's a little harder because you don't know.
Yeah.
Like people it's always going to be easier to get over the awkwardness of like role playing and acting out as a different character and like being a little bit of a fool. And especially if you've never played a system before, you're going to look a little dumb because you're like, I don't know how this works fully. And getting past that with like, maybe you're the kind of person who can do it with strangers and be like, I don't know these people, so I can take these bigger risks. But I found that if it's with friends, it's a little easier and there's a little more comfort there.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying. I used to perform music in front of people. I was in a band, a couple bands. And I always found it easier to perform in front of people I didn't know than it was the people that I did know because they knew who I was. They knew my stories, my secrets, and things like that. So like, I was more scared of being embarrassed by them, or about what they could say and said and what they knew. Right. Versus, this person will probably never see me again, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and usually I think if it's at a store, like a game store, those ones are going to be a little more tame because the game store, has like its reputation's on the line. If the game is not like, if you're not into raunchy stuff, if you're not into like really whatever the line might be for you, the game store is most likely going to be a good place to find it because they have to have their reputation in mind. And it's going to be easier for them to say, you are making people uncomfortable. You one person leave. So that way 20 people don't stop coming to the store. Absolutely. Online, it's a little different. That's kind of a coin flip, but that's not to say you can't do it. And also there's a lot of really good communities out there. So like a lot of D&D YouTubers have their own Discord channels and servers. And in that you can find people in that community who want to play a game. And that's a little bit better because at least you have some idea of commonalities there of like at least the type of game you want to play. So there's that.
There's always the pay the DM.
Yeah. Paying a DM is tough because then it's a
genuine job now. It's a genuine job.
It is. I just think I don't know. I like doing this for free. Like
I get it. I agree with you. Like, I don't know if I would pay someone unless it was like a celebrity type person. But outside of that, I'm like, I would just run the game myself.
Yeah. And I don't know if I would want to be paid because like, then it's a transaction and it's like, if you are not comfortable with doing something, but someone else is, and they paid you, there's that weird, and granted, hopefully you set all that stuff up beforehand. But second possible option is to just invite them to play a game, right? Because here's the thing. Why do you like this hobby? Why do you like playing Dungeons & Dragons or any other RPG? It could be for the role-playing reasons. If you have a friend who also is in it for the role-playing reasons, is an actor, a theater kid of some kind, great. Invite them. They're going to see what it's all about. And maybe they'll want to join in that session. Maybe they don't. But at least getting them in to see how it runs is going to be fun. You could have the tactically minded people who really like punch and things. And again, invite them, see how it goes. Because a lot of people have misconceptions of what it is. Mm-hmm. And especially if like they're just watching Critical Role or any other group. That group is not necessarily how your group works.
Correct.
And so the easiest way for them to know how your group works is to just invite and say, hey, come along. You're going to see how we do things. It's going to be really fun, really cool. And just sit in. You can play a character if you want, or you could just watch and see how it goes. I've had several people over the course of my time in college who have joined and then left and then joined and then left our D&D group. And it's okay. Like, it was fun. We had one guy who showed up and he was like super excited. And he's like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. He was making his character. And then as the game went on, he was like, this isn't for me. What, the way you guys play, I don't think so. And I'd rather
absolutely
him realize that and be like, all right, we tried. You saw how it worked and you're like, nope, that's not what I wanted. Much better than sitting in and being like halfway through being uncomfortable, and then maybe everyone else realizes that. Yeah, invite them to watch. They don't necessarily have to play.
There have been times I've invited people to like, hey, if you don't feel like playing, you're not comfortable with it, come watch us. We're just gonna be again, there a lot of it's gonna be a lot of silly stuff, a lot of serious stuff. Again, we're playing this game. We want you to see how much fun we're having. We want to bring you in on that fun. So that's the key thing in there is remember, like, this is all supposed to be fun, and you want them to also experience that fun. So
the third possibility, it could work for an individual. It can work great for a larger group that you're trying to introduce, and that's just running a game for them. So the inviting people to watch is if you're not entirely sure if your things are your interests are going to align, if things are going to work out the way you think they are.
Right. Now,
there's the people, like I said, who are Hannah and Evan, who I'm like, they're going to love this. I know they're going to love this. I just need them to play once. And Charles is another good example of that too. I knew Charles would really enjoy this. I knew he would because of how Zach Brooks was talking about it, how our mutual friend was talking about it. But just to be safe, we ran a one-shot. And so, just start off like, hey, I'm just going to run a very simple adventure. This is all we're going to do. Let's see how you feel about this one simple adventure. And let me tell you that nothing will hook people like one adventure. If role-playing games were a drug, a one-shot is the free hit.
It's that gateway.
It's the gateway, my guy. Most likely, if you're the one starting it, the easiest thing for you to do is to be the GM, is to be the one running the game. Sorry, you have all the burden on everything. That's going to be what's going to happen. Just because it's going to be harder to convince somebody, hey, you've never heard of this thing before, or you never played D&D before. You need to be in charge of all of that stuff. Yeah. It's not going to work that well, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree with that actually, because again, you've got to be the one who takes that step. If you really want people to play, you've got to do the work. You got to do the legwork. You got to do all that other stuff. You could also introduce it. Say you could tell them about like Critical Role and Dimension 20. However, you need to make sure those people watching like our game isn't run quite like this because you don't want to set up an unrealistic expectation.
Right. Yeah.
Because that'd be my biggest fear is set up something like, oh, look at all these cool dramatic moments and we weren't having them or something. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've heard of people who like watch Critical Role and then got their friends to play it, and then they were just trying to make them to be like Critical Role. And it's like, no. This
be yourself.
This is not how that works. So just, try it out. Invite people. The amount of times I've ran a one shot for people who have then been hooked is enormous. Charles, obviously, our friend Pedro, our friend Foster, all I had to do was run a one shot, and there was no expectation. Right. In the case of Foster, he already had a character made, which was super great because then I could like tailor the one shot
around
him a little bit.
It was good.
And then what was also nice was we had a group that already kind of knew what they like. Okay, we're gonna let Foster have a little bit of the limelight. We're gonna step back because we want him to enjoy it. Right. If you're introducing one singular person to an already established group, if all of you are on the same page of like, hey, we want this guy to have a good time, we want this person to have a good time, we want them to feel, like fun and enjoy it. Great, right? We did that with Charles as well.
You guess what you guys did with me. And it felt so cool to kind of like, hey, what are you gonna do? There was a lot of like, what my expectations, how like they let me run it at my pace. Like I didn't feel like I had to rush through the game. I didn't feel like I had to put on any silly voices or anything like that. Because initially I wasn't interested in doing that kind of stuff. And then I became that guy who wants to put voices to their characters and give their character more. Because my first character, the backstory was very plain. It wasn't like boring, but it wasn't like exciting either. My next character was a lot more exciting, and the third character built off that previous character. So like I was getting, as someone who likes to tell stories, this is like a drug for me. It's like this is a good creative outlet for me.
Yeah, and that's an important thing too. When you're introducing someone new, if it's a one shot, if it's an ongoing campaign, whatever it may be, try to limit the burden on them as much as possible. If they have already made the character, let them run that character. Even if it's not optimized, even if it's maybe too strong, let them run it, because the point is just ease the burden because they're trying to do this new thing. Ease it as much as possible. That also means don't expect a lot from them necessarily, right? You can have players come up to that new character and talk in character to see, like, engage, like, hey, this is how we do it. We're like, I think with yours specifically, I had Zach and Jeffrey. They were brothers and they interacted with each other a lot, and then occasionally would bring you in on it.
Yeah.
And so you could see like, this is how we interact. Are you wanting to step in or not?
Right.
Right. And so it's stuff like that, being like cautious of this, right? With Foster, we had a very fun moment where, for role play reasons, they were just trying to haggle, and he got this blind old woman who thought that was his nephew because he was playing a halfling. Yeah. He's like, "Yo, my nephew," and he felt bad to leave her, but then 15 minutes went by, and he's like, "No, I gotta dip out of here." Right? Yeah. Just like easing the burden and like easing them into it. Right. Is going to be the easiest way you can do any of this, for sure.
Yeah, give them those the guardrails. Give them their like in bowling give them those bumpers so they can stay within the story and they don't feel like they're doing everything, but they have guidelines to follow. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Now I'm going to have another tip, and this might be the most controversial tip we have.
Oh no.
Yes, unfortunately. And that is, as much as we as a channel want to talk about other RPGs outside of D&D, the easiest thing to get people to play an RPG is easing the burden, meaning if it's something they already know, if it's something they're already accustomed to, play that. You might not like 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. It might be for the mechanics. It might be for the company itself that's running it. Maybe we all have issues with Hasbro right now. Yeah. That's fine. But if you're trying to get someone into the hobby and they're like, I've always wanted to play D&D, great. Now, they might say, I don't know, it seems interesting. I'm just not a fantasy guy. Even better. Be like, okay, what kind of a thing would you want to try? Sci-fi? Great. I have an RPG for that. Superheroes? Great. I have an RPG for that. And how convenient. We have videos talking about a bunch of different systems. You should check those out.
Not even that, though. Like, just, again, like if they like a specific IP, Avatar, it exists. Star Wars, it exists. Lord of the Rings, it exists. If they're, and again, if just because they're not into 5e doesn't mean they're not going to be into something else.
Right.
So, and there's so many. Maybe they're into Lovecraftian. There's Call of Cthulhu. There are so many things you can do. Right. So many different ones out there. Because I feel like majority of people like when they hear tabletop gaming, it's quicker just to say D&D.
Yes.
Because like I refer to my group still as my D&D group because it's just shorter than saying, oh, it's my tabletop group,
Yeah. It's like how you Google something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You may have used Bing. Don't use Bing.
No one uses Bing. Right. It's the short term because it's the most popular thing. And so some people might think that's all it is. And so, yeah, be willing to say, no, there's some other ones. We can try it out. I haven't even played the system before. So again, that might ease the burden of being like, oh, you guys all know what you're doing. I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable with that. Saying like, hey, we're going to play a system none of us have played before. Oh, well then I'm going to be just as in the dark as everyone else. Fine. That's going to be cool.
Yeah. And also, if you have someone who is afraid because they're new to the hobby and new to the game, if you're an experienced player, even if you're not the GM, take them under your wing a little bit, kind of, again, put up those guardrails because you can do that too. Yeah. Especially if you've been playing with your GM long enough, in the play group long enough. There is a line, I know there's a couple of times where we've had players, like, I'm not sure what to do. And I would just come like, oh, well, do you have this? You can always suggest, a little metagaming's okay if it's to help a new player.
And if you are a player in this situation, like let's say your friend is the GM and you're like, he's like, hey, I need a ringer. I need somebody who I know knows the system. Mm-hmm. Don't try to steal the limelight, right? Don't try to make it to where it's all about you and how awesome you are. Because here's the thing. By inherently knowing the game system better than anybody else at that table, you doing one competent thing will seem 10 times more interesting. Yeah. I think like Critical Role has talked heavily about how they got into Dungeons & Dragons. Liam wanted to do it for his birthday because he had played it forever ago. Matt has been running it for a while, and he's like, okay, let me bring in my girlfriend, Marisha, and this one guy, Taliesin, who I know can help everybody. And originally, all they were going to do was just help them make characters, and then if they had rules questions, like intercede. But then they were all friends, and they're like, you know what? They can play with us. And again, what was really nice was they never stole the limelight. There is one time that Taliesin, apparently they were in like this do or die situation, and Taliesin's like, okay, let me use my ability to do this, and everyone was amazed. And it's really cool. It's like when you get into a new hobby, when you're trying something, you're like, okay, this is really fun, and then you see someone who's super competent, and you're like, that's how good we could get. Oh, that's so cool, right? Yeah.
But the possibilities are endless.
But notably, from what I heard, Taliesin never like made the decisions for the group. He never like interceded or made it all about his character. In fact, that character stopped existing after that one shot, while all the other Vox Machina characters continued on. Yeah. His disappeared, and then he made a new character. And so that's the kind of stuff you gotta keep in mind if you're a seasoned player playing with new players. Don't overshadow, because naturally when something goes wrong and you're like, mind if I try this, that's when you're going to have the limelight. And it's going to be really cool. And then if you just sink back and like, yeah, that's right, that's how it is. Nothing is cooler than just a guy nonchalantly doing something competently and then just being like, yeah, that was what I did.
Walking away from the explosion without looking.
Conversely, you could just be a bunch of chaos people who just kill each other in a very gory fashion, leaving only one person left alive.
One of us.
Just those are some tips we have for anyone getting new into the hobby. Now, we also have another thing we're going to talk about. Maybe you're like me and you started looking into other RPGs that aren't Dungeons and Dragons and you're like, these are all really cool. Oh, some of these mechanics are even better than Dungeons and Dragons. But your friends are so used to Dungeons and Dragons, it could be impossible to get them to try anything else. How can you do that? And we're going to talk about that right now.
All right.
Yeah, so
let's do it.
Charles.
Yes, sir.
When you had joined our group, it'd been like a year and a half, 2 years, right? And then suddenly I'm like, guys, I want to try new RPGs. What was going through your mind when I just brought that up?
So the kind of person I am, I love trying like new things, especially as I've gotten older. I'm like, I want to try something else. And I've always knew about, again, as a young lad, I knew about Dungeons and Dragons, and I even knew about other tabletop games. I just assumed they all played like Dungeons and Dragons, which they... Fun fact, they do not. So
a little bit.
But no, it was one of those things where it's like, it can be nerve-wracking a little bit because like, okay, now I've got to learn a new system. I'm not sure how good I'll be at it. But because the role player in me, which again, I didn't know even existed until I started playing Dungeons & Dragons. So shout out for that. But I was like, this could be a lot of fun. I could play different characters, be from different worlds, have a different backstory, a fantasy background. It's not necessarily gonna be the same thing, overall as like someone from a dystopian background. I'm sure they'll have their similarities. I'm sure they can have their thematic, connections, but it's a chance to play something new and different. So I was excited, nervous, but excited. That's probably the best way to put it.
You can know for a fact people will enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's just getting them to do it in the first place. I knew for a fact my players would enjoy all these new systems, but there was also a hesitancy, right? We have a player named Jeffrey who likes to play literally just the same thing over and over again. He loves his barbarian class. He doesn't want anything else to be different, and that's fine. That's perfectly okay. If that's how you play, that's how you play. In fact, I've recently found people in the real world, like who I met in person, were like, yeah, I just play like a barbarian, maybe occasionally a fighter. And it's like, that's it? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I guess it's not that uncommon.
Yeah, I think people often will find things they're comfortable with and just stick with it, and that's fine. Again, if you have a comfort character or a comfort build or whatever, yeah, stick with it. Again, the point of the game is to have fun. I would never bully anyone to, in the sense of like, if I'm playing a game and you're gonna play the same person over and over again, that's fine. I might try to convince you to do other things. I'm like, wouldn't it be fun to play something different? If you tell me no, I'm gonna back off. I'm not gonna beat you over the head with my thoughts on it.
We're going to go through the same tips again. You ask, you say, hey, can we just try it out? Show them a video, and then just try it once. I knew with us I was like, okay, guys, we're going to try Candela because it's intended to be a short-term campaign. So if you don't like it, it's 3 sessions. And if you do like it, we could do something else afterwards. And I think everyone was in agreement. We all liked having a break from Dungeons and Dragons. We just didn't think that system was our fun. That's fun.
We were calling them like basically palate cleansers because it was one of the things where, we did a lot of Dungeons & Dragons. We did that for almost 2 years. And then now it's like, okay, let's do something different. So it was fun to play something different, but Candela wasn't really going to be the one that was going to change people's minds. So,
and that's important to note is the new system you're playing, is that the issue? Or is it genuine? Like our group is only really good at Dungeons and Dragons. They just want to keep playing what's familiar. Is like knowing the differentiations between those things, knowing like what do we enjoy, what we don't, right? We learned very quickly, right? And as obviously for this channel, we've had to learn like what kind of players we have at our tables.
Right.
So when you learn that, you learn the kind of games that people want to play. So Jeffrey really likes simple mechanics that can still allow him to be somewhat tactical. But then you have people like Evan, who's just gonna, as long as he has room to improv, that's what's important to him. Then you have Zach Dunkerton, who, as long as he can just be a mass murderer in some way, shape, or form, he'll be okay. Yeah, and then Charles, who just wants to be able to roleplay, right? If you can have means of being able to do whatever works for the group, you're going to be able to make it work. So, for example, you could have a group of role players, and then you tell them to play Lancer which is all about having the best optimal build for your
Yeah.
mech as possible, there might not be as enjoyable as, say, playing something like Vampire the Masquerade,
Yeah.
or even like any of the Powered by the Apocalypse games, which are so much more focused on the role-playing parts, but while still having a mechanical sheen to them.
Yeah. And what I say too, and as a role player, someone who enjoys the role play, you can, when those moments come up, you make the most of them. I don't need to role play every single thing I do. I can actually do combat. I can strategize. I can be tactical. And even in combat, there are moments of role play. You just have to take those moments as they come.
You finally gotten everybody to try an RPG of your choice.
Okay.
You could have gotten them to finally play D&D, and they've gotten the itch, right? You could have gotten them to play a new RPG, and they're like, actually, we like this system. What do? You try to start a campaign. Good luck. That is probably the hardest part of this hobby, is starting a long-term campaign and continuing to have it happen for however long you do.
A campaign doesn't have to be something you play for years. It can be something you play over, a handful of sessions in a couple of months. But if you want to continue that story, just leave it open-ended so you can continue that story, so people could use the same characters they were using in this shorter campaign.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Mainly because we need to try a bunch of different RPGs, because the point of our channel is to try a bunch of RPGs.
Yeah, and do our due diligence with it as well.
Right. So we're doing shorter campaigns, right? We have not a Lancer. We have a Traveler campaign right now that we're trying out. And I've said, like, this is a shorter campaign. Like, I have an arc. I have how long it's going to last for. It's only going to last like 3 months at most, maybe a little bit longer, because that's what like we can do, and we can get a satisfying story that way. And then we get to try out these new mechanics and stuff like that. So don't feel like, again, you have to lock into this. Now we're doing this every week for the next 5 years. Just being like, hey, we all enjoyed this. Let's make it a little more permanent. How does this work? And then obviously talking like, are you going to be able to do it once a month? Maybe you can only do it once every few months, but you can do it for like 10 hours at a time once every few months. These are the questions you got to start asking as you're figuring out your campaign. But honestly, that's going to be the easiest way to get someone into the hobby, is once they've had the one shot, being like, hey, how does your schedule look? Can we make this work? Again, with our friend Foster, he got hooked real quick, which I am not surprised about, because that dude loves fantasy. So I knew and the fact that he literally made a Dungeons and Dragons character, bought the books and everything, and he's like, I'm ready. I'm like, yeah, you're going to love this. We're trying to figure out, like, okay, because he has a newborn baby, right? Like, he's a little busy. He's still in getting his master's. So it's taking him some time. We're like, okay, maybe we do it once a month. Like, we give up one of our Tuesdays, you come in. With my friend Pedro, he's like, I have board game nights every Monday, but every other Monday I will happily play D&D with you guys, right? If someone is saying, like, I'm willing to give up time for this thing, like, go for it. Do it. Unless it's like, oh, hey, I don't have the time. But like, I would recommend, like, hey, you just got someone in the hobby. Like, you're probably doing that because you want to play more with them. So definitely just open that up for sure.
So the biggest burden is going to be is scheduling, because people have lives, as we discussed. I have a family. I have kids. I have a wife. I have another job. Frank has another job. He has things that he's got to do. I've got things that I got to do. So really finding that time you can give up to sacrifice, because you're going to have to sacrifice time to do it.
Yeah, ultimately the big thing is, are you having fun? If you are, great, continue to have fun. If you're not having fun, that's going to be a lot of different issues, and maybe we'll have a video talking about like what to do when you realize you're not having fun anymore, because it might be the playgroup, it might be the system, it could be of various amounts of things. Yeah. But ultimately, if people are having fun, try to like make time for it, because it's a nice thing to be able to have fun in this world that doesn't let you have fun sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of people got into this the Dungeons and Dragons when COVID hit, because everyone was stuck in one place. So now we're able to kind of go out and see people again. But you don't have to. Again, you can still play with these people online if you want to, because I'm sure there's lots of people who live in different states and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, there's so many ways to play online at this point.
But yeah, so there are options out there for you. What are you comfortable with? How do you want to play a tabletop game?
Yeah. And you can keep watching our videos to give you examples of what games you could be playing, some tips on like how to understand each other as players and what you value and stuff like that. So make sure you subscribe for all of that. If you want us to do a very concise video, that is, you send to people to introduce them to the hobby. Be like, your friend sent you this video because they want you to play an RPG with them. We will happily do that video, but you have to let us know in the comments. Also, let us know like how you got into the hobby. We had we had a lot of interesting people who were like, that the post you had that were talking about like the things that were struggling with them. And I think there's a common thread of just trying it out for the first time was the hardest part.
Yeah. Just getting started. That's everything almost.
Yeah.
Starting off doing this for the first time was really hard. I had never done anything like this before. People make comments about how I say certain things again, but I digress. You just got to practice. You just got to go do it.
You're not recording this for the internet to see. We might be, but that's not that's our fault. We're going to be stupid like that.
Yeah. So we're going to be on tangents.
Indeed. So like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Tune into the next video where we will talk about something related to RPGs.
Maybe.
Yep. And as always, stay witty.